Okay, good afternoon from Yerushalayim. We're up to Nun Hey Amid Aleph. We just saw a very interesting psak halacha about if a person buys a field from a guy, that a person can beintayim go ahead and acquire the field. I thought it was fascinating. I told Simcha as we gave yesterday about the guy leaving and the Jew not being kind yet, leaving like a no man's land where you can go in. Like the guy, he gets his money, so he's gone. So for all intents and purposes, the field is hefker until the Jew comes along and is machzik in it, and therefore one is able to go ahead and be kaparayin, so to say. And the shaila was whether he has to machloikas Rashbam and Taisus was he has to make him money, make up to pay him. But however, that's the halacha. That's the halacha. So that's the last thing we left off with. So today we have a digression of digressions, and really it's the sugya of dina de malchusa dina. So what exactly is dina de malchusa dina? So I didn't go into it yesterday, but let's do a little more in-depth analysis of it today. So let's go back to yesterday's daf, Nun Dalet Amid Beis, and there's a Rashbam there, Dina de Malchusa Dina. It says Vama Shmuel Dina Malchusa Dina, where before the wide lines, the very wide lines at the bottom, I'd say about 10 lines up. Vama Shmuel Dina Malchusa Dina in the Rashbam. We're doing the Rashbam. Kol Masim, all taxes, Va'arnoinios. These are also types of taxes. Umin hagos shel mishpatei malachim, and the hanhaga of the laws of kings, sheragilim lahanik bil malchusam, that they were accustomed to go ahead and do bil malchusam. Dinahu shekol bnei hamalchus, all people of that kenegreich, of that reign, of that land, mikablim aleim mirtzoinam, willingly they accept chukei hamelech, the laws of the king, umishpatav, and right, the chukim, the statutes and the laws. The hilkach din gomahu, it's a din gomer. The elam machzik b'momen chaveroi al pi choik hamelech hanoig bier mishum gesel. In other words, so if the king would say that you're machzik in a person's field, right, that you didn't pay his land tax, then that's the law, dina de malchusa dina. So it's clear from the Rashbam, this is totally a monetary matter, it seems to be, and it also has very much to do with the din of the malchus. And as we're going to see, Be'ez Hashem, not as much the din of the melech as the malchus, and we'll explain the difference. But that's the segue into today's daf. So says the Gemara in Daf Nun Hey Amin Aleph, Amar Rabba, the first wide line, Hani Tlas Mili, these three things. Hani Tlasmili, these three things, Ishtoili Ukvin Bar Nechemia, Reish Galusa Mishmei de Shmuel. Ukvin, the Bar Nechemia, the son of Nechemia, who was the Reish Galusa, the head of the exilarch in Bavel, said to me in the name of Shmuel, what are the three things? One, this is the way the Rashbam learns. One, Dina de Malchusa Dina, the din of the Malchus is din. Two, Va'arisusa de Parsi Ad mem shanim. We'll see what that means in a second. And the third thing, Bahani Zaruri Dizavin Ara Litascha Zvina Zvini. Okay, so the first one, Dina Malchusa Dina, we just did. And now the second din, Barisusa de Prasoi Ad mem shanim. Now, if you look at the Rashbam, he doesn't have the word ad there. He just says Darisa de Parse Arbam Shnin. Let's go down. I like his second pshat. V'yesh mefarshim, right by the end. V'yesh mefarshim, that what does it mean? Oh, it's Benji. Inami. Benji, we're up to Nun Hey Amid Aleph. We just said that three dinim. We said Dinim Malchusa Dina, and we said that the Persians they don't have 40 years. So we're explaining the Rashbam, where before it gets wide, go up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 lines, 8, 10 lines up. Inami. Asal Ashminan. The Afagav de Bishar Mekomos Habi chazaka Yisrael begimel shanim, the Eretz Paras in Persia, any chazaka b'pachas mimem shanim. And you got to be on that land for a chazaka for 40 years. The din of the malchusa husham came. That's the din of the malchus. So one din of the malchusa dina, and an example of the din of the malchusa dina would be the Persian law that chazaka is only after what? 40 years. Chazaka, that's the Persian law. So that's two. Din of malchusa dina, an application of din of malchusa dina that you have to be on by Persia. You have to be on there for 40 years in order to establish the chazaka. And the third din was Zuhuri de Zavnin Arlataska Zvinu Zvina. What does that mean? That the Zuhuri, these were the people who were wealthy. They were wealthy. And they would, let's say a person was unable to go ahead and pay his taxes, his land tax, they would go ahead and pay it for them. But the din of the malchus dino is that then that land will become theirs. So says the Gemara, Bahani Zaharuri, these people who would go ahead and pay the land tax, and then it would be given over to them by the government. The Zavin Ara Litaska, Zivnu Zvina. That was, it was a sale. That was a sale. Let's see Rashbam. Zvinu Zvina, first white line. Masha Koina Hakarka Ma'avde Amelech. The Avdei HaMelech would take away the fields for the people who couldn't pay their taxes. And then they would sell it, right? The Bishvil Hamas, they would take it away because of the tax. Shenoisnim Mechran, who would then Shenoisnim, they would give it to these people who would buy it. To Mechran Kayim, that the Mechran would be Kayim, and it wouldn't be like you're stealing for someone. The Dina Malchus Dina. Then Yachsru Bailam Rishainim, or Yisashu, if the original owner got wealthy, or they came back and paid the taxes, in other words, they can't go ahead and make an error on these people who bought it because the sale is a sale. So it seems like this. This is the way the Rashbam learns, guys. 3 dinim. 1, din of the malchusa dina. 2, Persians 40 years. 3, if a person can't pay his taxes on his land and the government goes ahead and takes away the land from him and sells it, the sale is final. That's the din of malchus dina. So it comes like the Rashbam. It's basically a title, din of malchus dina, and 2 examples of it. Good. According to the Ritva that I didn't see inside, but was quoted by the Art Scroll, the din of malchus dina is the title. The first din is Persia. The second din is taxes, and the third din is, well, that's only if they take it away by the land tax, not if they take away by the poll tax, by the tax on the person. Why? Because if they take it away from the poll tax, they're going out of their bounds. They don't have ability to do that. Only the land tax does the king give them the power to go ahead and take away the land. If it's the poll tax, the karga, the head tax, that's not. As we see inside right now. 3rd line down. When is it a good sale? If the king's messengers sell it, that's dafka is the land tax that was taken away. Avol the karga, if it was taken away, what? Because of they didn't pay the head tax, let's say you pay tax per person, loy. My timer, karga a karfa the gave monach. What is karga? It's the head on a person. In other words, and they're not going to take it away. So if the king's messenger would take it away, he's a goslin, and therefore the sale is not a sale, and therefore the person's entitled to get it back. Okay. The Ritva learns that's the 3rd din. He learns din al-malchus dina is the general, the aim, like the main idea in school. And 3 examples of it would be 1, Persia, 2, sales tax, land tax, and 3, but not karga. That's the way he learns. Okay, the Ritva learns obviously the first way, that din malchus dina is 1, Persia is 2, and land tax is 3. Okay, so those are the dinim over here. Says the Gemara Vaita. Rabbi Huna Brei Yeshua Amar, Afilu Sa'are Dekada, even the beans, the barley bean, the barley, barley in a cod that's being stored in a cod, in a jug, mishtabde lekarga. In other words, He is arguing on, Shmuel. Rav Huna Bar Yeshua is arguing on Shmuel. He says that for the land tax, the head tax, even metaltalin is meshubid, and certainly what? Karka. So if it's taken away for what? The for the head tax, right? The sale is a good sale. So that's the machlokes. Like Shmuel, it's only a good sale if it was taken away because you failed to pay the real estate as tax. But if the head tax, not, then it's not a good sale. Says Rav Huna Bar Yeshua, even for the head tax, it would be a good sale because everything a person owns is meshubit to pay that, and that's the din. That's the din. Rav Ashi, Amali Huna Bar Nasin, Kasha Ba'ameimar, Imkain, Batalta Yerushas Benoy Habachar. Davle Roy. Okay, we'll see the Rashbam in a second, but for brevity's sake, there is halacha that a bechor gets pishnayim, but a chor only gets pishnayim in what the father is holding on to at the time of his death, not something that will come in the future. That's called roy. So now, if a person dies and the land is meshubid, right? The land, and not only the land, metaltalin, everything is meshubid. Everything's meshubid. Then it's not in his possession yet. Why? Because it has to pay the tax. So if it has to pay the tax, it's not mine now. When the tax is paid, then the land, then the metaltalin becomes yours. So that would be considered futures, roy, and therefore the bechor should not get pishnayim in that. If you're telling me, Rav Huna Bar Yeshua, that the metaltalin is meshubid, then the bechor should not get pishnayim. Because again, it's not considered muhsik in the possession of the dead man until what? It's paid off. Because it's meshubah to the loan, to the chiyuv. So and then when you pay it off, then it's considered coming. And then and only then should it be what? In the reshus of the estate, to be pishnayim. That's roy, says the Gemara. Rashbam says on that it's not such a shnon kasha. So let's say in this land, that's the law. In another land, that's not the law. So you can mekayim the pasuk of pishnayim in land B. So land A, you can't be land B. He holds not to the shtar kasha. We're going to give a teretz, but he says mishtabnis from that kasha. We don't die from this kasha. Not such a shtar kasha because you can mekayim the mitzvah of bechor in another land. You're telling me the minig over here is that what? They'll collect the land to you for the land tax. Excuse me, for the head tax. Well, there's another land. But Fred the Gemara kasha, why are you only asking on the head tax? Says the Gemara, if that's your kasha amalei, yihachi afilu taskanami. Even the land tax you should not get pishnayim in a regular case. Why are you asking me only on the poll tax? Only according to Huna Bar Yeshua. Even the land tax should be considered what? Roy. Why? Because it's not yours until you pay it off. Says the Gemara, well, Elamayas Tcholameim, what do you have to say? The Yav Taska Meis. He paid off the land tax and he died. Since he paid off the land tax and he dies, it's not considered, it's roy, it's considered muhsik. So Hachanami, here as well, regarding the head tax, the karga, the Yav Kargu Meis, he went ahead, he paid the karga and he died. Since he paid the karga already, it's considered muhsik, and therefore get pishnayim. Okay, so now, this Amar Avashi, Amali Huna, Bar Nasin, Sheltinu L'Safrei de Rava. I asked the Seifrim of Rava, the Amruli Halacha Rav Huna Bar Yeshua, and the Lacha is like Rav Huna Bar Yeshua, that even the metaltalin is meshubah to pay the land tax. V'loihi, but it's not true. Hasam la'ukmei milsahu de Amar. The reason they said it for their own selfish purposes, because they wrote shtaris. They wrote shtaris that you can collect the metaltalin. Let's see Rashi. Let's see Rashi on here. V'loihi. Hasam less hilchasa Rav Huna Bar Yeshua. The halacha is not like Rabbi Huna Bar Yeshua. The loy mishtabde, that it's not mishtabed. Loy lekarkois, loy metaltalin, right? Lekarga. Neither land or metaltalin is mishubed to pay the head tax. The yizavin lekarga, and if you sell the land to pay the head tax, if they take it away and they sell it, loy havis ivnayu zivina. It's not a good sale, and therefore the original owner, can go ahead and make a claim to get it back. The karga akakafta de gavra manach. because karga is on the person, not on the property. That's the key. It's not on the property; it's on the person. So if the person took if the melech, the head, the collectors took it, that's not the law. That's not the law. Okay, now the inu safri the Rava, the Amri hilchas like Rav Huna, and these one who said halachas like Rav Huna bar Yeshua, leukmi musayu boy. What does that mean? Lekayim asayim. They wanted to keep their own deeds of writing the shtaris intact. Ushtaris shekosru, and the shtaris that they wrote, right? Hashtaris v'nimkru akarkas v'adismina. In other words, they wanted to go ahead. They wrote shtaris based upon this, that the sale took place based upon collecting for the karga. That's the reason they said Allah is like a Yeshua. Since they wrote shtaris on land that was collected for not paying the karga, so they were like a bedafa. That's why they said it. But like the chachamim, not. Okay, now there's a big shiloh over here, guys. What's the machloikis between Shmuel and Rav Huna bar Yeshua? What's the shiloh? Is the shiloh whether it's dina de malchus dina or not, whether to collect from the karga or not? Why don't you ask the melech what the din is? Guys, this isn't a shiloh of Jewish law, a machloikis and how to interpret a pasuk, a machloikis how to interpret the svara. It's a question of judicial law in that county, in that country. So why don't you ask in that country, what's the din? Is the din that what? That the head tax you do collect or you don't collect? If you do collect, then it's a good sale. If you don't collect, not a good sale. What's the machloikis between what? Rav Huna bar Yeshua and the Shmuel. That's the machloikis we showed them over here. So I thought we'd spend a little time on this. So this is a piece from the Rashba. This is the Rashba. Guys, you see it. Does it say imachru? Imachru? Good. Imachru Gizbari Melech Karka, Machmas Karga. If the Gizbari Melech, they sell land because the guy failed to pay the poll tax, Umasim v'sashchayrais sheyesh loy al bnei Medina. What types of taxes they have on the people? Ein mimchor mecher. Like Shmuel, it's not a good sale. Minadin. V'alfilu tziva kacha melech. Listen to this, guys. And even if the melech went ahead and said you could do that, even if the melech said you could do that, it's not a good sale. She'im kain lama nechelku b'sarei dekada. Because if that's the case, why are they arguing about the barley beans in the kad? Imim shtabi l'kargam lav. What are you arguing? Nishal es hamelech. Go ahead and ask the king v'hu ma'idiyah, and he'll tell you what the law is. Why is there a machlokes? Right now, go and say, why does it say on the Constitution? Why does it say right now? What's the psak right now in that place? What's the law in the state of New York? What's the law in Jersey? Whatever it is, find out what it is. It's a great kasha, guys. You understand? You're telling me they're arguing whether what? The karga is a din in the melech, not a din in the melech? It's a machlokes mitzias. Go find out. The eich gamru pasku. How could they conclude and say the less hilchas kavase the Rav Huna bar Yeshua imadav tali b'mashi yetza melech? If it's tali what the melech wants, how can you say the halacha is not like a Rav Huna bar Yeshua? If the melech says the karga, if you don't go ahead and pay it, I can take away your land. Then the halacha is dina machusa is he can take away your land. So how can you tell me the halacha is not like him? That says the Rashba. Ella, this is guys. This is the Yisoid. Here's the Yisoid Dina Malchus Dina. Ella shekach eskimu kol hamechabrim v'chol hamefarshim. Says the Rashba. This is from his Rebbe, the Ramban. This is a universal. Everyone agrees. The Amru Dina Malchus Dina. Again, one of the nuggets of when you say Dina Malchus Dina. Ella bidvarim sheheim chukei hamalachim. It's got to be a chayk from the kings. The lashon of the Ramban, miyomim yamima, from previous years. It's got to be something that is passed down, right? Noitel bizroya, but aval shamelach noitel bizroya. But for a king to take it with his own power, einay din shechukei hamalachim yaydayim umiskamim. Because the laws of the melech, they are known. The laws of the melech, they are known. So one of the times. In other words, a piece of that we have to fit in. When do you say Dina Malchusa Dina? If it's only something that's shayah to the Malchusa, to the kingdom. It's been around from days and days. The Constitution, it's been around. This is the law. But if you get a king who comes and shows up and says, you know what? This guy he's a politician, and you pay him off, and he'll change the law, then we don't say Dina de Malchusa Dina. And that's the machlokes over here. They're arguing in previously what the law was regarding karga. You can't ask the current king because that's not the din of Dina Malchusa Dina. The din of Dina Malchusa Dina is something previously that in Paskin for Dairais. That's Dina de Malchusa Dina. And I think it's meduyik in the Rashbam like that. Guys, look back at the Rashbam that we began to share with. The Rashbam on Nun Dalet Amid Beis. Shmuel, Dina Malchusa Dina, Kol Masim va'Arnunus, Umin Hagos Shal Mishptei Malachim, Sherogilim lehanig b'malchusam. What does it mean that they're ruggled to go ahead and be noyig in their malchus? What does that mean? Meaning it's been around, right? They're ruggled to do it. It's not something new. A new guy comes to town and begins to write his own thing. It's geschmack, guys, right? It's geschmack the diak. They're ruggled to do it. This is the common. So I think the Rashbam is in agreement with the Rashba and the Ramban that this din of Dina Malchusa Dina is only what? It's something that's been around for a long period of time. Now, this is a tremendous heter. When you have a din and people are going ahead and doing questionable things regarding tax evasion and different things. Why, guys, this is the biggest problem, tax evasion, right? That's what, if Dina Malchusa Dina, tax evasion is a big problem, yet we know, I'm being recorded right now, Harold, so I'm sorry. But we know that not everyone is like right on the up and up about this, correct? So sometimes the heter is that this isn't something that's been around for a long time, right? All of a sudden they go ahead and they come up with a din, right? The Democrats come up with some crazy tax. So this is very important, Nagel Halacha L'Maisa, about where people have a heter to go ahead and kind of. This is definitely bloggable stuff. I know his mind's working. This is very geschmack up. Again, the very Rashbas is super geschmack, and I think the diak in the Ramban I liked in the Rashbam I like very much. They're a gilim, they're accustomed to do it. Now, in other din, I thought this Simcha shared with me. This is another din of Dina Malchusa Dina. Okay. Do you see a Gemara over here? B'moiches Rabbi Me'elov. It's standing up. Okay. See, I don't know what you're seeing because I have two things on my screen here. Okay, guys. This is a Ramban. The Ramban is going on a Gemara in. It's going on a Gemara in Nidarim, right? That you can avoid the tax collector. You can make a neder to avoid the tax collector. The Gemara says, how can you make a neder to avoid the tax collector? Adina Malchusa Dina. So the Gemara answers, this is a self-proclaimed tax collector. Now we understand beautifully. This is a guy, right? He's not. He's self-anointed. So very geschmack. Based on everything we've been saying right now, of course, this guy's he has no shaykhas Dina Malchusa Dina. Dina Malchusa Dina is only what? Something that previously. The Kasul b'Toisvis, the Dafka b'Malchei Oivik Kechavim Amad Dina Malchusa Dina. Then we say, you know why we say Dina Malchusa Dina? Mifnei Sha'aret Shaloi v'Yachaloi Melahem Im Loi Tasu Mitzvaisai Igarish Eschem Aretz. The reason for Dina Malchusa Dina is, guys, this is my land. I own it. You don't like it. You don't keep the laws. Get out. Says Taisvis, guys. The reason for Dina Malchusa Dina is if you don't like my laws, get out. Geschmack. It's my land. I own it. This is the way the game is played. That's it. Get out. And therefore, what? If you don't like it, leave. Yisrael. Loi. There's no Dina Malchusa Dina in Eretz Yisrael. The fish Eretz Yisrael, Kol Yisrael Shutfin Ba. Eretz Yisrael, everyone is a shut of an Eretz Yisrael. The Chiyamina Dina Malchusa Dina, Hanimi. Okay, that's Vaita. So says the Ran in the Dorim Daf Chav Ches Mleni. Chav Ches. The Ran in the Dorim Daf Chav Ches says beautifully. Dina Malchusa Dina. The Svara is quoting Taisus is this is my land, this is my land, and these are my laws. You like it, great. You don't like it, leave. Eretz Yisrael, no Malach Yisrael can say this is my land, because Eretz Yisrael is divided to the Shaftim, the Shvatim. It's divided to the Shvatim, and therefore what? There's no Dina Machus Dina. So just to summarize what we saw, Dina Machus Dina is usually a din in Mammon. This is the din of Mammon. These are the laws. The laws are what? They're around from the beginning of time. They've been around. It's not self-appointed. And the Lashon is, guys, the Ramban says, it doesn't say Dina de Melech Dina. It says Dina de Malchusa Dina. Malchusa means the kingdom. Doesn't mean the king. Doesn't mean the king. It says Dina de Malchusa Dina, not Dina de Melech Dina. And therefore, we also see that Tosfos says the svara is that what? It's his land. He can go ahead and do what he wants. And therefore, what? If you don't like it, leave. And therefore, there's no din of Malchus in Eretz Yisrael. And that will explain the machlokes between Shmuel and Rav Huna Bar Yeshua. How can they be arguing? Why don't you ask the king? The answer is the king doesn't have the answer, because whatever he says, not necessarily. They're arguing about the previous law, about the karga, about the poll tax, whether they can collect it and sell it or not. Rav Huna said yes. Even the Sari the Kada and the Chachamim said not. The Rabbi Shmuel said not. So I thought it's a very short daf today. I thought we'd spend a little time on Din Malchus Dina. Harold, you good?
Yes. Yeah, so the 40 years of Shtaris, that was historical by the Persians.
That was the Persians, right? That's what the Rashbam said. That was, and these are all examples of Din Malchus Dina.
Right.
40 years of Shtaris. Or the land tax, only the real estate tax, not the karga. That was the machlokes. And these are examples of Dina de Malchus Dina.
That Rashba's on this Gemara?
Rashba's on the Gemara Nun. Yeah, the Rashba, that's the Rashba's Nun. The Ran is on the Dorim Chav Ches.
Could you send those out so we could be printed, or?
Yeah, Bez Hashem. Yeah, I'll send it out. I'll send it out after the shir. Bez Hashem. I think it's very geschmack. Yeah, good. I like when I say it's very geschmack because I like it, but what are you supposed to say? No, we don't really like it. We're just making you feel good later. What are you supposed to say?
Do you want us to use the thumbs up or thumbs down?
No, we're only one directional. Only north, not south. Very good. Okay, another interesting law. From Rav Ashi, says Rav Ashi, Pardash. Now, this person is a pardocht. Now, what's a pardocht? Doesn't sound like a very good person, right? And you'd be right. If you said a pardocht doesn't sound like a good guy, you'd be right. Take a look at the Rashbam, guys. Pardocht. Adam bottle, mimalacha, doesn't do any work. Umi talmid, and he doesn't learn. Umi derech eretz, and he's not a nice person. Ve'ein oisik b'shalayim klal. He doesn't go ahead and give it over to the betterment of society whatsoever. Messiah Masa. What does that mean? Hu chayiv ba'oil hakahal. He's chayiv to go ahead and be part of the burden of paying the taxes of the congregation. Even though he doesn't go ahead, he doesn't make anything to the city, doesn't do anything to the city, he is chayiv. So the lashon is pardach, Messiah b'masa. He has to help the city. That's the lashon of the Gemara. Pardach Messiah Masa. V'hani mili the etzaliste masa. That's if the people of the city save him. In other words, he's being charged taxes, and they go ahead and pay his taxes. They go ahead and save him from the king. Then he has to go ahead and be involved. So avol adiski siyata dishmaya. However, if it's andiske, then if the king went ahead and patted him, let's say the collector went ahead, he skipped over his door because doesn't have any money, then he's not chayiv. Why? Because siyata dishmaya here. They were meichel. Siyata dishmaya, they were meichel. So when they're not meichel, then he has to be involved. But if not, if he's not, then they can go ahead and be meichel. Amar Rav Asi Rav Yochanan. Hametzer v'achatziv mafsikin b'nichsei ager. Now we had guys din the other day. If you go ahead, you have two fields, A and B, and there's a metzer between the field, and you're going ahead and be kind of field A, you're not going to be kind of field B, because the metzer makes it two separate fields, correct? Remember, that's what we said. We're dividing the field up through a metzer, so you're kind of field A, you're not kind of field B. Chatzav is the type of grass and trees that Yeshua made to demarcate the different plots of land, because it didn't grow it didn't grow this way. It grew straight down. So it's like a very good fence. And that's what the chatzav is. So the mafsikim b'nechsei ager, it makes it two separate fields. And therefore, since it's two separate fields, if you're machzik in one, you're not koine of the other. Avaleinyan peya v'tuma loy. Regarding peya and tuma, which we're going to see on the Amid Beis, not. Peya, you're supposed to give what? Peya from every field that you have. You give peya. If you have a field, two fields, and they're demarcated by a chatzav or a meitzar, is it chayiv peya in two fields or one field? Says Rav Asi in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, L'inyan peya and L'inyan tuma, it's considered one field. You'd only have to give what? You only have to give peya from one field. Right, guy? In other words, you have two fields. There's a hafsik. L'inyan peya, it's considered one field, and therefore one will do the job. That's Rav Asi in the name of Rabbi Yochanan. However, Kiyasa Ravin, when Ravin came up from Eretz Yisrael to Bavel, Rabbi Yochanan, he said in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, I feel peya tumen, even peya tumen makes it two separate fields. So not only Le'iyad being machzik v'nichsei ager is it two separate fields, even when you peya v'tuma, it's two separate fields. Now, what is exactly peya v'tuma? What exactly are we discussing over here? When we say peya v'tuma, what's under discussion? So first peya. The elu mafsikin lepeya. These are barriers to go ahead and be mafsik the field that you be chayiv in two separate payas. Hanachal. Rashbam means nachal esan, that's kind of like a valley, like a ravine, or nachal, it can be a river. Bashlulis, you have a body of water, like a gathering of water. V'derech harabim, the derech harabim, which is 16 amis wide. V'derech hayochid, which is 4 amis wide. So madach derech harabim is mafsik. Certainly derech hayochid would be mafsik. Lo yizu afsu katani. Right, not look at Rashbam. Derech harabim tesayin amis roichiv derech hayochid dalet amis. Lo yizu afsu katani. Not only derech harabim, but even derech hayochid would be mafsik. Ushvil harabim. That's people would go and they would walk along this path. Rashbam shvil harabim shaholchim shom rabim b'raglayim. Aval derech harabim makam hilach agolis vasusim. The difference between shvil harabim and derech harabim, shvil harabim was a public path, but it was only used for people. Where derech harabim was what we call the streets, where you had horses and whatnot and wagons. Ushvil hayachid akfua ben b'yamos chama ben b'yamos geshama, doesn't make a difference. They will be mafsik l'inyan peya. So what's the din? According to Rav Asi and Rabbi Yochanan, it's not mafsik l'inyan peya. According to Rav in the name Rabbi Yochanan, it is mafsik l'inyan peya. It's two separate fields. Okay, as a segue into the next digression is Tumah. We learned from Saita that Safik Tumah b'shus hayachid is Sveikei Tamei. Safik Tumah b'shus hayachid is Sveikei Tamei. There's a suffix whether the person touched the woman or not. You know they were behind closed doors. You don't know if anything happened behind closed doors. And we said, just like the Saita, if she's behind closed doors with another man that's not a husband, she is not permitted to a husband until she drinks from the Meimarim. So therefore, she's Tamei. The Lashon in the pasuk in Nasai is she's Tamei. Who adin Safik Tumah b'shus hayachid Sveikei is Tamei. Okay, so we have the following case. You have a field, a big expansive land, and it's the winter time. In the wintertime, people were prone not to walk in these fields because the winter wheat or the winter crop had been planted. So if I'm going to walk, it's going to be detrimental for the crop. So since people didn't walk in these fields, it had a din of Rishus HaYachid. Good? It had a din of Rishus HaYachid. So therefore, if in one of the fields there was a kever, and there's a shiloh where the person walked in that particular field, then you have the case of Safik Tumah Rishus HaYachid, Sveikei Tamei. Now, what happens if the field has demarcations on it, right? So if you hold that a boundary or these demarcations are not mafsik, so no matter how the expanse is, it's a case of Safik Tumah Rishus HaYachid, because you walked in there. Again, if you know for sure you didn't walk in that field, of course there's no suffix. The suffix is whether you did walk in that field. But again, that field could be divided by what? By a boundary. So if you view it as two separate fields, then you're going to have a discussion. If it's viewed as one field, there's nothing to discuss. So we're going to have a machlokes between Rebbe Elazar and the Chachamim, and the nafkamina between them is going to be dependent upon whether we view as a field, a demarcation, as what is being mafsik or not. Says the Gemara. Tuma Maihi, where is the application of the machlokes between Rav Asi and Rovin vis-a-vis Sofik Tuma Rishus Hayachid? Here it is. Tuma Maihi Titnan. Hanichnis lebika b'mos hageshamim. Someone goes to the bika, he goes into a valley with many fields, and the key is b'mos hageshamim, because b'mos hageshamim is going to be what? A Rishus Hayachid. V'tuma b'sada ploinis. And there's a tuma in a certain field. V'amar, halachti l'makam halaz, I went there. Ve'ena yodeya, I don't know. Im nichnasti lo'isim makam v'im lav. I don't know whether I entered that field or not. So Rebbe Elazar mitaher, Rebbe Elazar is mitaher, the Chachamim mitamoyin, and the Chachamim says it's tamei. Shahaya Rebbe Elazar oimer suffik biyatar, suffik magatuma tamei. If it's a suffik coming in, it's tahar. If it's suffik touching, it's tamei. Okay, let's see. Says the Rashbam outside. Loi Rebbe Elazar, what's? I have a suffik over here. I have a suffix whether I was in the field or not. And even if I was in the field, maybe what? I didn't go ahead and touch it or not. It's a svek sveka. When you have a svek sveka, usually a svek sveka is tahar. So loy Rebbe Elazar, since the field was demarcated, it's considered two separate fields. So A, it's a suffix whether I was in that field, that was tamei, and B, this is suffix whether I was mile on it or I touched it, right? So therefore, since it's svek sveka, it is tahar. Like the Chachamim, no. The Chachamim say it's considered one big field. So therefore, it's tahar. Therefore, you're tamei. Therefore, you're tamei. So that's the explanation of the machlokes. Now, just look at the Rashbam. Suffik biyah tahar. Go down the second line where it gets wide at the end of the line. V'hilcha. The Rebbe Eliezer or Rebbe Elazar. Imafsik meitzar v'chotzav beintayim v'tuma v'achs mehen v'ein yodeya be'ez mem nichnes suffik biyahu. It's a suffix whether you were there or not. V'tohar v'ileka meitzar beintayim, and if there's no meitzar beintayim, suffik maga. There's only suffix whether you touched it or not. V'loy suffik biyah, right? And therefore kula soda achas hein v'tamei. There would be what? One suffix and it would be tamei. So that's the nafkamina between the two when it's demarcated or not. It's a suffix bia or suffix maga. If it's two separate fields, it's a suffix bia. If it's a suffix bia, I'm tar. If on the other hand, what it's only one field, it's a suffix maga. It's a suffix where they touch it. Because Isaiah wasn't the field. It's only one field. And therefore you would be tummy. That's the nafkamina. Now, the very big, huge taisus over here, very big taisus. You say this to get taisus, and he says something very, very geschmack. Where do we learn out, Benji? Listen to this. Where do we learn out Safik Tuma B'Shus HaYachid from? We learn it from Saita. Good. What's the suffix by Saita? The suffix by Saita is whether you touched it or not. Memela says Rebbe Elazar the following. I hold it's a svek sveka. Why? Because by the only shaila by is whether it was touched or not. Over here it's a suffix whether there was a bia or not. So we have no suffix there was a bia. Zicha by saita she was behind closed doors by an individual, right? Zicha by saita she was behind closed doors by an individual, right? And therefore, it's interesting. Really, you should be tahar. Really, you should be tahar. We have something called the cheskas taira. A person is the chazaka of being tahar, still proven otherwise. It's the din of suffix tuma b'shus harabim, b'shus hayachid, that removes that suffix. In other words, that removes that chazaka. Normally, a person has a cheskas taira. So why are you taking me off that cheskas taira al suffix and taka in b'shus harabim? We don't. Overrides the suffix. Yet, what does the din of Saita tell me? The din of Saita is a tremendous chiddush. What's the tremendous chiddush? That despite the fact you have a chazaka of being tahar, nonetheless you will be tamei, safik tamei, memela. Here's the Torah over here. Rabbi, the Chachamim say that since the safik over here is not it was tamei, it takes you off the chazaka. Who adin? There's no svek sveika. Guys, safik tahar. We say one safik is tamei. Svek sveik is tahar. But again, over here, we're removing the whole concept of safik, because really, you should be tahar. You have a chazaka. So in other words, we take away the whole parsha of safik and svek sveika. Because the safik over here, you should be tahar. Chazaka should override the safik. Says the Torah, it doesn't. Says the Torah Sheval Peh, it doesn't. Safik Tomer B'Shus HaRabim, Shemishus HaYachid, Sveikei Tamei. So just like there's no din of what? Of safik, no, because the chazaka is overridden, who adin svek sveik is overridden. Who adin svek sveik is overridden. Okay, so now.
Was there
Yeah.
also Torah that there's a reyes because the Edom came originally and knocked out the Edom came originally and warned it not to be behind, and so that knocks out the chazaka.
Yeah, but that I think that's all part of the I think that's part of the process. I'm not sure, Baruch. I'm not sure, but so but you think that takes it off the chazaka of Tyra because Adam came and said you might. She's still unless you see an act of Issa, how could you go ahead and take off the cheskos Tyra? Until proven otherwise, the person is innocent.
Yeah, but the way we see the reyes anyways will still weaken a chazaka.
That could be the reason why it works. You're explaining the mechanism. I'm speaking about the amalgamated, the universal din. In other words, you're explaining why it does go ahead and do it. You're explaining how the mechanism of it works. But it really, looking at the universal din, we should keep on the chazaka. Now, why don't we? A, Adam came in, right? And B, you're explaining why we don't keep on the chazaka. But that's the Gzeres HaKasev. Again, unless seen otherwise, you're guilty, right? And that just because Aiden saw you behind closed doors, you don't know what happened there. So you should have chesed. Why don't you? So you could say, well, Aiden, since you warned him, and so that is the mechanism of breaking it down. Why we don't say it, Baruch. But the fact is, you should say it. We don't say it, right? Because Safik Toma B'Shus Yachid Sveikei Tamei. How does that work? You could say that the Adam started breaking it down, but really, this Taisa says the chazaka, we should keep on the chazaka over here. But the reason we don't is so. Therefore, since we do that, this is in a svek svek. Now, what do you learn out of Saita? You learn out of Saita if not Safik Bia, Safik Maga, Safik. You don't say Safik Bia, Safik Maga. Bia, you did have over here. You had over here clearly light Rebbe Lazar, the svek sveka is you learn from Saita. So just like Saita is a suffix what, whether you would touch it or not, but not suffix be or not, right? So too Rebbe Lazar says the whole suffix is what is whether I'm not going to learn out from Saita because my Saita is a suffix whether you know for sure they were behind closed doors. The limit from Saita is whether there was a nagia or not. So therefore, what does Rebbe Lazar say? He says suffix bia is going to be tahar because you're not going to learn from Saita. You're not going to learn from Saita because Saita is suffix whether you were touched or not. With a chum, they don't make a chilik. They say no, tum is tuma. We're not going to make a chilik with suffix bia. We're not going to make a chilik with suffix, and therefore there's no svek sveka. Like the chachamim, what's your suffix? Your suffix is whether you're tummy or tahar. I know there's one field. Now the suffix is I was in that field. Whether I came in the field, didn't come in the field. No, you're in the field. The suffix is whether you touched it or not. That from Tuma, that from Saita, we learned that you're tummy. So then this is a little bit of behind the scenes flavor of what's going on over here. So again, just to summarize, we know that le'inyan demarcation by of cheska of ger, where it's hefker, it is mafsik. If you go ahead wide and you are coin in one field, you make chazaka in one field, it does not help for the other field. It's mafsik. By Peah and by Tuma, we have machlokes in what Rabbi Yochanan says. Like Rav Asi says it is not mafsik. It's considered one field. So if it's considered one field, then you'd only chayiv Peah once. In Tuma, everyone would hold your tameh. Everyone would hold your tameh because only one suffix, whether you touched it or not, because zicha you were in the field, right? However, like Ravin Ravami, like Ravin, who said Rabbi Yochanan, it is also mafsik. If it's mafsik, you'd be chayiv what in 2 payas, and then in Tuma, right? Like Rebbe Laza, you'd have a svek sveika, and therefore you would be svek sveika. You would be tahar. Okay, thank everyone for listening. Say a kapitel tehillim. The last thread, to be a little clear. Why don't the Chachamim hold it's a svek sveika? Because they hold that al pi the normal laws of figuring out a suffix, right? We always keep a person on their chazaka. So if you have a cheskes tyra, you should be tahar. However, the chazaka doesn't work here. Okay, the chazaka doesn't work here because we say the suffix tumah b'shus hayachid sveikei tami. Benji, you're explaining why that is, but that is the metzias. You understand? You're explaining why that is because the reyes of reglayim l'davad, right? But the bottom line is that them's the apples. So memela, if you're telling me the normal halachas of being mevaris suffix don't work over here, memela the din of svek sveika also doesn't work over here. The din of svek sveika also doesn't work over here. That's why the chachamim don't hold of svek sveika. That will be an explanation of that. Okay, have a good one, guys.
They're just going to